Hi, how's everybody doing today? This is Rich here on behalf of Rich TV Live with our very special guest. It is Obi Strickler, the CEO of Grown Rogue. How you doing today, Obi?
Doing very well, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing really good. It's good to see that the cannabis sector is finally green. We've had a tough 9 months, and it's been just, honestly, it's been kind of depressing for everyone involved. And today we are starting to see some green again. So it's really nice to see. And I'm in Canada, and we just had the cannabis conference here in Vancouver, one of the largest in the country. And it was a very mixed conference with a lot of people saying Aurora's going to zero, and then, which I don't believe is ever going to happen. And then a lot of other people saying there's no way Aurora goes to zero. So there was just like a lot of conversation about companies going to zero. I don't agree with that sentiment at all. I believe in this sector. I think that this is an industry that will only get bigger. It will only get better. And you're in America. I'm in Canada. So let's talk about it. What are you hearing on your side of the fence? And what do you think about Grown Rogue for 2020 and everything that's happening in America? I know Illinois just opened up. Michigan just recently opened up. So a lot of new states are opening up. So let's talk about it. You know, what's going on with Grown Rogue and what's your perspective on what's happening today and moving forward into 2020?
Well, Happy New Year to start off. And to everyone listening, can't believe it's 2020 already. Amazing how fast things go. I think what you're seeing is just the natural volatility that you get in an early market. I mean, the industry is very mature from like a product standpoint. I mean, people have been growing and selling cannabis products for the last 50, 100 years, right? And as you transition that into these recreational and legalized and medical markets, you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, you get a lot of like excitement and investor interest, and then people don't necessarily hit targets because really there is such an unknown component around what the consumer and how fast the uptake is going to happen. And I think a lot of people really underestimated the complexity of building a compliant recreational cannabis business. They looked at kind of the historical trends of people who were kind of in the illicit market making what they perceived to be these big dollars, and didn't really when you put accounting and legal and regulatory and compliance around these different components of building a real business inside of a regulated market. I think they just underestimated, one, the time it takes, and then the cost. I mean, there's no doubt the opportunities there. I mean, it's a huge market. Like globally, they're talking it's hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of total consumption. The U.S. is probably $50 or $60 billion. But it's going to take time to bring all those people into the fold. And each state has its own regulatory structure. Oregon, which we operate and are very efficient in, is much different than, say, Michigan. It's going to be different than Illinois. It's different than California. And all these different pieces create, these little blips and challenges. And I think what you're seeing is just that everyone overestimated or underestimated the time it takes to get to where you want to go. And I think, again, there was a little bit of this, such a level of excitement that people were not overcommitting, but there was kind of a growth at all cost mentality. And that works as long as there's people continuing to fund that growth. And, a lot of the metrics is one of the things Grown Rogue has been really focused on for about the last 6 or 8 months is, what are the metrics that matter, right? How do you get to profitability? A great example is, a year and a half ago, one of the biggest metrics people wanted to see is what's your market penetration? How many dispensaries or provisioning centers are you in? And it was really great to report a big number. Like at one point, Grown Rogue could say, hey, we're in 300 dispensaries across the state. There's 500 total. We have 60% penetration, and we're increasing 15 dispensaries a month with a target to get to 90%. When you dug into the detail, what you didn't see was that of those 300 dispensaries, only 70 were buying on a monthly basis. 110 were buying bi-monthly. And which dispensaries were actually creating revenue for the company? Because 150 of them might buy $500 worth of product and need to deliver it, 3 hours away and 200 miles to the coast. So it sounded good on paper, but was it really creating a fundamental business? And I think that's what you're seeing is people who are like, can you build a business and can you be successful? 2020, in our opinion, is the year of people that are really in the industry for the long term who want to build a business and are not just trying to create financial engineering. to have a quick stock pop and maybe get a return on their money and exit really fast. And Grown Rogues is well positioned as any company, especially considering what we went through in the Oregon market, which suffered compression much faster and has now recovered very, very well. And then also our history. I personally have 10, 12 years in the medical markets, now 3 years under my belt, running a recreational business. And so as we look to expand, into states in the Midwest and that are coming into their own, we're at a huge advantage in terms of our, approach to high quality infrastructure, growing costs, understanding the market, the regulation, the compliance. So we're really excited about taking that proven model into these new opportunities.
And what do you think about Illinois? I heard that they've already raised like $20 million in the first 12 days of legalization. I mean, that's incredible.
Crazy. It is crazy. I mean, you have this huge population that wants products that is restricted. And when those floodgates open, I mean, it's amazing. What you see in every early state is, and what Grown Rogues picked as our expansion strategy is we like to enter new markets during the transition from medical to recreational legalization. Just because recreational is where we see the biggest opportunity, the most consumers. And in these early states, especially outside of the West Coast, you don't have such a history of production and products, and it takes a while to scale up. I mean, the reason Oregon went compressed so fast was because we have a very large outdoor contingent. Allows us to produce a lot of product at a very cheap price pretty easily. When you're trying to build, multi-millions or tens of millions of dollars indoor facilities, you got to have a much better team, you got to be more sophisticated. And so usually the time for, increase in productivity in terms of that supply-demand balance takes much longer in states like Illinois. Michigan is going through the same thing, right? Like Michigan is so undersupplied right now that I think when they went legal on December 1st, they were sold out of recreational product in like 4 days. Like that kind of thing, because there's just no supply. And so that's why prices are really high. Pounds in Michigan will go for $4,000. We would sell them for $1,200 or more.
Wow.
And it's the same cost. It's one of the reasons we're really excited about the things we have on the docket that are coming together for us about our expansion into the Midwest.
It's kind of funny. This entire sector has been destroyed by shorters. And the shorters have these tactics. And I'm really happy that Trulieve has fought back, because did you see what Trulieve did? How they sued a short seller for libel? This is what I think needs to happen now, because what I've seen has happened is the shorters have been feasting on this sector for an entire year. They've essentially made billions, and they're so greedy that they don't stop, right? They just keep going and going and going and going because they're a one-trick pony, right? So they're one-trick pony, and now they're so evil in their tactics that they hurt everybody in their path. They hurt the companies, they hurt the insiders, they hurt the shareholders, and they'll even go so far as to put out short reports opening up the entire lives of Trulieve. They talked about Kim Rivers' husband, his past. Like, just reading the article was painful because I couldn't believe how deep they were going. And it was really ugly that they went that far to that level so they can make money. And I was really proud of Kim Rivers and the way she handled it with force, immediately fighting back, putting a counter lawsuit immediately on the shorter, and now essentially putting him in court in Florida where he could potentially go out of business. He could go bankrupt because he's going to get sued for millions. Like, this is the way all cannabis companies need to operate, because what's happening now is the shorters know that these companies are not going to fight back, because other than Kim Rivers and other than Kronos Group, only a few companies have actually fought back. Most of them, when they get attacked like this, they just sit back and they allow the shorters to eat them alive. And that's not the way you handle these shorters. You have to fight fire with fire. Otherwise, you get caught up in lawsuits. You get caught up in settlements. And what happens is these shorters use this as a tool, because what happens is this shows up in your press release. The lawsuits show up in your press release. So as an investor, you see this showing up in the press release, you get scared. You want to sell out your position because you don't want to invest in a stock that's getting lawsuit. So this is the tactics of the shorters. Then what happens is the company has to spend money on legal fees, which hurts their financials. They have to settle with investors and with these shorters, which hurts their financials. And then the shorters come out and say, look at the company's financials. They're terrible. Meanwhile, they're the reason why the company's financials are terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm literally starting to out these shorters because their tactics are disgusting. I feel like these are the lowest life forms in the world. And really what they're doing is they're destroying this entire sector for investors, for the owners of these companies, the operators of these companies. And I think as an entire sector, we need to find a way to fight back against the shorts because I find it to be ridiculous, these tactics they're using. I use a website called marijuanaindex.com. And if you go into the news, all it is lawsuits. It's just lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. It's really, it's essentially destroyed the sector. So it's really nice to see that the sector's bouncing back from the bottom. And I believe based on my analysis that we've got 300 to 400% growth potential for the entire sector to go back to all-time highs.
Great. We'd like to see that.
Which realistically, Obi, is very reasonable because we're in a growing sector. And if you look across the board, the majority of these companies are really growing. We're growing as far as revenue, including yourselves. You guys are growing your balance sheets. You're growing your customer base. You're growing your market share. So these companies will continue to grow regardless of what the shorts have to say, regardless of the short tactics, regardless of everything across the board. Companies like Aurora Cannabis, companies like Grown Rogue, companies like TrueLeaf, companies like Liberty Health Sciences, companies like Organigram, which exploded yesterday post-market due to the fact that the revenue jumped from 12 million to 25 million in a quarter. These companies are growing. So the shorters can use whatever tactics they want. They can lie all they want. They can cheat all they want, and they can continue to play their game. But at the end of the day, we all know as investors, eventually you're going to find a floor. And that's where we're at. We're at the floor. And companies like yourselves and companies like Canopy Growth, companies like TrueLeaf, companies like Organigram, companies like C-Web that just bounced off the floor, these are companies that are real businesses.
Yep.
We're not putting money in the ground like we were 5-10 years ago when everybody was talking about gold and tons of money was being raised and put into the ground to find gold. This is green gold. You guys are actually selling a real business. You guys have real businesses, real products that people are buying and people are going to continue to buy. Right? If there wasn't a massive need for this product, we wouldn't have had massive lineups outside of Illinois' dispensaries day one, correct?
Yep, 100%. I mean, it is like, and I spent a lot of time in the mining industry, so there's a lot of parallels in terms of the markets, but, we have real products. I mean, real revenues, like we're not in exploration phase, and, what you got to do is pick on the companies that really have a business model that can actually be sustainably developed within a disciplined approach. And I think that's one of the biggest things that these companies are realizing now is you got to be disciplined. I think a lot of money was wasted on fluff, fancy things. I wouldn't say wasted per se, but even Grown Rogue, when we started the company, there was a series of different, opportunities that we pursued to understand what was the best way to create the right business in this space. Because it's so new, there's no history. We're building it from the ground floor. And there's got to be a little patience with that, knowing that you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things you tried that didn't work. The key is which companies continue to persevere through and make the right decisions the majority of the time. And unfortunately, as you talk about the short sellers and some of the pressure that the market's seeing, you got a lot of vultures that come into industries like this. And not only because it's new in the market, right? So there is not as strict of a regulatory, we're seeing a lot of issues in hemp right now in terms of just lack of quality support, people breaking contracts, farmers and different, companies who are trying to establish a certain, business model that's being restricted because they're made promises that aren't kept. You're going to get some of those vultures that come in. It's unfortunate, it's like death spirals, but you see it in every industry. They kind of prey not on the weak, but on the less informed. And the problem is you see a lot of companies in this sector who have leadership teams that are not prepared to manage the rigors of what comes into industries like this because the growth is so big, right? And so you're going to get a lot of those bottom feeders that are coming in trying to turn a quick buck. And if you're not prepared for them, they can create quite a bit of damage pretty quickly. Just the things you said, they short your stock, it goes down. Then they promote all these things, but your revenue's lower, and it's just this downward trend. And it's really hard to kind of get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I did an interview with Namaste Technologies. They told me that they settled millions of dollars out of court with investors and shorters and people that attack them. That hurt their financials. Then today I do a video on Namaste, stock was up 7%, and right away, shorters are right away talking about their revenue. And I'm sitting here going, you hurt their revenue. Yeah. You guys specifically hurt their revenue. Like, it's crazy.
I mean, quite frankly, what you have, and it goes a little bit to why I think Rogue is such a good opportunity, is you have a really tightly held stock.
Good.
You've got a lot of companies that came in that raised money from any source. And you see all the companies that did a bunch of convertible that are now like, oh crap, our conversion rate's at $3 and we're trading at 60 cents. And we don't have the money to support that $30 million. What are we going to do? Right? So getting in a predicament that does not allow them to make good on their obligations. But also when you get too big of a shareholder base early on in these companies that for all intents and purposes, probably 90% of the public companies should still be private, right? They went public for access to capital because of the restrictions around the illegalities. In Canada, there was a bunch of restrictions to start. It's gotten better, like big banks are coming in. In the US, there's still all kinds of restrictions. How do you access capital to grow your business? And, those issues forced us to go into a route that maybe some were not quite prepared for all of these additional challenges that come up where people can manipulate your currency and your stock. And, it's going to be a challenge. We got to push through it. And, the industry is going to be surviving. I mean, the beauty of our space is, normally when you start a new business, you walk into someone and the first few questions they say are, do you have a product? Yes. We can say yes. Does it work? The answer is absolutely, right? Like if I got a new technology, like, well, does your product work? And have you proven that? And then the other question was, how big's your market? Our market's huge.
Of course.
We answered a lot of those questions. And
absolutely.
Really it comes down to who can execute.
That's right.
And you have people that believe in the opportunity, believe in the space, have the experience, and they execute. Those are the companies you want to do.
This reminds me a lot of the tech bubble of 2000. And everybody and their sister was building websites and was putting money at it. And a lot of people lost, right? Through that, we got now Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat. These are all companies that are all online giants, and now they rule the world. Netflix, all the FANG stocks, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they've all come through the internet bubble. Yep. So they called it a bubble, and they said the bubble burst, but did it really burst, or did that create some of the biggest, most powerful companies that exist today, 20 years later? I predict in 2040 that some of the biggest, most powerful companies in the world will be cannabis companies. That's my prediction. So yeah, right now we're having the bubble burst because we're in year one. Sure, attack us now while we're infants, while we're babies, when we can't walk and talk on our own because we're just babies. The whole sector's babies. We're all new to this. You're new to this. I'm new to this. We're all new to this, right? Attack us now. Because where I see this going in the next 10, 20 years is companies like yourselves, companies like Aurora Cannabis, companies like Cannabis Growth, companies like TrueLeaf, companies like CureLeaf. These will be the companies that will be ruling the world because we're talking about a product that is global. We're talking about a product that people use all over the world. We're talking about, when you talk about cannabis, CBDs, edibles, cannabis-infused beverages, hemp, we're talking about 5 products that collectively, I would say 95 to 100% of the world is using one of these 5 products. So
It has huge market demand, both on recreation and on the medical side. That's the other thing. You've got two very diverse uses
that's right.
of the product, right? There's responsible recreation, which is like you can make a proxy to like, consumption of alcohol, even though it's much healthier for you than cannabis is. But you also have all the pressure that's going to put on the pharmaceuticals, right? From CBD and some of the benefits we're seeing out of that to pain relief. I've had, it's amazing as the industry matures, people who have serious medical conditions, whether it's cancers or, other kind of things are coming to us because they understand that they can trust us in this industry, asking about alternative solutions to help with their ailments. It's hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of market potential. That's probably just in the U.S.
Yeah,
Like North America, like across the globe.
it's crazy.
The sky's the limit for it. It's just, again, but it takes time to get there. I think
Yes.
that's what people thought is they're like, oh, we're going to go from A to Z without any of the steps in between. And it's very rare that you can skip steps when you're trying to build something. People try it all the time. But it's early. You said it again, like here we are, like we're infants. I refer it, and I'm not a baseball fan, but it's like this is still the first inning, maybe the bottom of the first. It's so early in our industry. And we have a long time before we hit stability and maturity. Think about it. Like it's in the U.S., what is there, 12 states now that are legal out of 50?
Yeah.
Barely 20%.
Yeah, like it's not even federally legal yet.
Not even federally
And people want to sit there and judge it.
Yep.
Like we know what you're doing. Like nobody's stupid. When you're judging the fastest growing industry in the world, we know what you're doing. You're a shorter, you have your tactics, and you're playing your game. Everybody knows what you're doing. So you're either on one side or the other. You're either a cannabis enthusiast, someone who wants to be a part of this fastest growing sector in the world, because we know everybody's going to be using this product all over the world because it's being used for elderly people. It's being used for athletes. It's being used for medicinal purposes. It's being used as a beverage. It's being used in hemp now. I was at the cannabis conference. They're using hemp for everything these days. Pens, clothes. Who knows what hemp can be used for? It can be used for almost anything. So the reality is there's only going to be more research that's going to go into this. Companies like GW Pharma have FDA approval. So there's going to be giants, and I think GW Pharma will be a giant in this sector. And I predict they will be $1,000 stock. So you guys heard it here first. They will be $1,000 stock. Another company.
Right now?
Buddy, I'm telling you, GW Pharma's a beast, man. They just reported 108 million in revenue. They've got FDA approval, and they got a product that's changing the world. It's saving lives. So when you're changing the world, people are going to recognize, like, look at Tesla. People looked at Elon Musk. They made fun of Elon Musk. They talked about him going bankrupt. The man is now worth $31 billion and has one of the biggest success stories in the world. And I see Teslas everywhere.
Yep.
That's how I know a company's successful. How do I know that Amazon's going to be successful? Everybody does their shopping on Amazon. How do I know that Netflix is going to be successful? Everybody uses Netflix. How do I know that cannabis is going to be successful? Every time I walk into a dispensary, there's people buying cannabis. It's that simple. If you've got a product that people want, chances are you're going to succeed. And people keep trying to talk about how these public companies can't succeed and they can't compete with the private companies. I totally disagree with that. I'm going to explain why. Yes, the private companies don't have all the taxes. They don't got the burden of paying the government. They don't got to necessarily be transparent. I agree. But there's one thing that the private companies don't have that the public companies do. Stock.
Yep.
That's the game changer for the public companies. They got shares that they can use to raise capital. They can sell shares to raise capital. They can use those shares, and you can use shares to go out and acquire private companies that are revenue generating. That is the game changer.
Liquidity, right? You got liquidity.
That's right. And you got liquidity. That's the game changer that the public guys have that the private guys don't have. And right now the private guys are laughing and they're mocking the public guys. And like, I told you private ways to go. We told you being private was the way to go. But what's going to happen when that market share continues to shrink?
It's kind of one market though, right? Like, Rich, so a lot of what people will say now is that the reason private is better is because of some of the, just additional regulatory. It's more expensive to run a public company than it is a private company. And the thing that private companies have tried and then they've ultimately failed in, especially over the last 6 or 8 months, is because you don't have this public ticker, I can set whatever valuation I want. The issue is that's not holding true because people are getting more educated about what are the true valuations. They're looking at the public companies as a proxy to understand what the private metrics should be. I just think that everyone needs to have a little more patience. Everyone wanted to become an overnight success.
Yes.
Investors, companies, and this is a long game. It's not a sprint. There's been periods of sprinting, but this is a very tactical race, almost like cycling or something like that, where I don't know if you do cycling, but I'm not an expert in it, but a lot of people talk about, well, it's just people riding a bike. But there's a lot of tactics into when do you attack, when do you sit in the peloton, right? And cannabis is not, it's not a sprint, it's not a 100-yard dash. It's also not a marathon because in between those, you're going to have periods of very active components, right? Where you're moving very quickly and taking advantage. But it's just, you gotta have some patience in this space. It's gonna take some time for it to develop. And there's gonna be the natural volatility. And it's across products, it's across pricing, it's across stock price. I mean, it's the only thing I think that has been consistent throughout the industry is that word is volatility. Everything else has been kind of prices are up, they're down, stocks are up, they're down, opportunities are up, they're down. We're years from probably having a stabilized market. The beauty of that, a lot of people get, concerned, but in an unstabilized condition is where the most opportunity exists.
Totally. 100% agree with you. I mean, look at the markets today. It's a great example. Anybody that bought these bottoms is laughing today.
Yep.
Now, if you bought the top, you're crying. And it's like that with any stock. It's like that with any investment. But the reality is, I actually like what's happening in the cannabis sector because what's happening now, the hype stage is over. Companies are not trading at $17 when they have no revenue.
For now, it's over for now.
It's over for now, correct. And yeah, it could come back and be bigger than it ever has been. And I believe at some point it will be. We just don't know when. But as investors, we are very short-sighted because 9 months does not make a sector, right?
Nope.
We've been doing this, really, this sector has been existing since 2014. I remember when cannabis stocks started to go legal and you couldn't even deposit shares in cannabis companies. And I've been trading for many, many years, even before that. And I remember watching the Hemps of the worlds and the MJNAs of the worlds. These are penny stocks that were the first cannabis public companies. Yeah. And they're all penny stocks. They're all kind of trashy, OTC, QB type, penny stock, pink sheet stocks. And they were what I would call the ugly ones. They were the first that were pretty much getting into cannabis just for news. So they could sell stock, right? They just wanted the news. They wanted the press releases because every time you put out a press release, people would buy your stock because it's cannabis. And this is how they existed for the first couple of years. And I remember because I was working in the industry, and if I ever worked with a cannabis company, no broker would take the stock. Nobody. So we've come a really long way. People forget. We've come a really long way in even 5-6 years from being at a point where there was only 5 or 6 cannabis companies to now there's 440 legal, professional, public cannabis entities.
440 is the number of public companies now.
That's a lot, right?
Yeah,
and everybody keeps predicting they're going to go bankrupt. And I'm like, where's the bankruptcies?
You'll see some of that, I think. You've got some companies that...
You'll see some, but it's not going to be 400. People are trying to be they're all going bankrupt. That's not true. That is 100% a lie. It is not going to be that way. And my prediction is the ones that get bankrupt, they'll be replaced with new companies right away anyways.
What you're going to have, right, is what most all these companies have a fairly good set of assets. What they have is poor leadership.
Yes.
It's what you're going to see in a lot of these entities that are having those challenges. The individual assets are worth more than the combined component. And I can think of several companies that fit that category. And what you're going to see is the shareholders are going to start peeling those assets out. And, because you don't want to take on necessarily, a stock that's very diluted, it's trading, it can never recover. Because a lot of people, again, didn't understand the capital markets. I was talking to one of our large shareholders, and one of the things they really like about Grown Rogue and the commitment long term to what we're doing is they say, okay, there's more capital experts in the cannabis markets than there is cannabis experts. And that's a recipe for disaster because they're not trying to build a business or trying to financial engineer some sort of monetary increase. And that works for a little bit, but it's like musical chairs. When the music stops, where do you go? And so, getting behind good, solid companies with good management teams who are executing on their business strategy, that's where the real opportunity is.
I agree with you. There's so much opportunity in this sector, and in times of turmoil, in times of unrest, in times of uncertainty, that is really the best time to position yourself to take advantage. Bitcoin is a great example. Bitcoin went down. People forget. Bitcoin went from $1 to $21,000. Okay? Talk about a bubble, right? That, like, nothing ever in finance has ever happened like that I know of in my lifetime. Came all the way back down to 3,000. Everybody said it was done. Very similar to the cannabis sector. And then they went down from 20,000 to 3,000 in 1 year. For 1 year, very similar to what's happening in cannabis. It was beaten down. Everybody said it was crap. Everybody said it was garbage. Everybody said it was trash. And now where's Bitcoin? Bitcoin's bounced up. It went from 20,000 to 3,000, and now it's bounced back up from 3,000 in the last year to 8,700 today. So if you got in at 3,000, you've made 150% now on Bitcoin in a year. The same thing's going to happen in the cannabis sector. Eventually, we're going to find a bottom. You can only go down for so long. Market makers, believe it or not, like to make money up and down. I know it's hard for cannabis investors to believe, but as much as they like to make money on the way down, they love to make money on the way up. And so do very rich, high net worth investors. So,
that guy told me one day that fortunes are made at the bottom.
Yeah. In real estate, in stock, in everything. Gold, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Oil, you want to make money buying the bottom, buying the dip, right? So could we get a more obvious bottom than seeing cannabis stocks trading as a sector at the same prices we were trading at as a sector in 2017? So technically, as an investor, you could not have invested in this sector at these levels since 2017. So you could have taken 3 years off, bought in 2017, sold at the peak, and then chilled until right now and said, okay, great time to load up again because we're back to 2017 prices. Rinse and repeat.
Investors who are doing that, right?
Totally.
The problem is, like fear and greed are what drive investors. And that's a really hard thing to overcome. But fear and greed are probably the two most consistent frameworks of, right now everyone's in the fear mode. And when the stock starts to turn again, all of a sudden you're going to start to see it. It's just not stabilized. I mean, we've seen it in the pricing markets. We're seeing it in the capital markets. It's got some time before we get there, but, you've got to have a long-term approach to it. And that's the issue. A lot of people now have such instant gratification just in life in general, whether it's cannabis markets or whether it's, if you want your food delivered to your house now, you can call companies that do that. They'll do your groceries. Like Netflix is automatic. You don't got to drive to a Blockbuster store anymore. Like,
yeah.
Instant gratification. And good things take time. Just like a fine wine or a good whiskey, right? Like, a well-cured cannabis product, right? It takes time to make things great.
Obi, let me ask you a question. So you're in the industry, you're talking to people every day. What type of response do you get from the private sector? When you talk to private guys and you say, hey guys, why don't we work together? We'll give you some stock. We'll make you a part of our business. Are people excited about that idea? Are private guys still kind of like, no, I want to stay private. It hasn't really worked. What kind of response are you getting? Because I was speaking to Halo Labs CEO Kiran Sidhu yesterday, and he's acquiring all kinds of businesses. Mm-hmm. And he's like, Rich, nobody's acquiring companies, so we're going to acquire them all. He's got this attitude right now. He goes, while everyone's afraid and they're not acquiring, we see assets everywhere, and we're going to continue to acquire. And he's acquiring assets globally, and he's using his stock, which I think is genius. That's why companies are public. Why use your cash? Keep your cash in a strong cash position. Use your stock. Create a class of convertible preferred shares. Use those anti-dilutive instruments to go out there and acquire revenue generating assets that you can book on your balance sheet to start having more cash flowing on your balance sheet.
That's the key, right? Is
right?
revenue generating with good teams, right? So, the challenge comes with that philosophy is you got to make sure you're buying assets that fit your model.
Yes.
We've seen a lot of companies that were buying assets only to increase your revenue.
That's right. Just grabbing everything.
MedMen's a good example. Great company. They've had some real challenges, but they're now divesting non-core assets because they realize it's hard to manage all those. I've talked to people recently about M&A sounds fantastic, but integrating new infrastructure to your company is more challenging than just a piece of paper. You can do anything on a spreadsheet, anything with a contract. And so, it needs to be strategic and within your plan, but using your stock as a currency is great. The challenges we've seen are around, you have to find, unless you're going to raise capital to support that asset, use your cash, they have to be revenue or profit generating. Otherwise, it becomes a drain on your resources. And so it's balancing those two different factors. And I think the private companies have gotten a lot more amenable to this kind of transaction. I know even 8 or 9 months ago, the valuations they would place because they really didn't follow the capital markets. They didn't understand how the multiples were working. We talked to companies where you're 3 times what we think the value is. Right, and so trying to get them to be realistic, because a lot of these companies, it's so fragmented that they're it's like their baby. They started it, they have this false expectation of what it's worth, and really don't understand the challenges that are still there because they're uneducated about what's really happening in the markets. But for the right opportunity, some of the stuff we're working on right now, absolutely, now's the time to be picking up quality assets when they're at a discount.
And you know what? When you say that, these private guys, they're not stupid. They a couple dispensaries here sold for $10 million. They're never gonna make $10 million at a dispensary.
100%, yeah.
If you got a store and you're making $500,000 a year, and then after expenses you're making $100,000 a year, and somebody offers you $10 million, you're gonna take it and you're gonna run, right? And say thank you. So these public companies are sitting here overpaying for these assets in a lot of cases because, like you said, competition. If they don't get it, Aurora's gonna get it. If they don't get it, Afria's gonna get it. If they don't get it, Canopy's gonna get it. So they want it.
Back, right? FOMO is real.
Yes, it is.
Their fear of missing out, and again, they're rich. They're buying revenue only because historically, and again, I think revenue is really important.
Totally.
If it's profitable.
Totally.
It doesn't matter if you're doing $100 million a year in cannabis revenue. If it costs you $50 million to do that, what's the point?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so you got to make sure that it's a sound business decision, because with the fragmentation, not only in terms of how many people there are in the business, but the differences between each state, it's not as easy to scale cannabis. And so a lot of that, it's just not as simple. Maybe the only thing is retail that requires scale like that. You got to think about we can't ship out of the state yet. Right? So we have a manufacturing center in Oregon. I would love to be able to ship our product from Oregon to Michigan and take advantage of these 4,000 pounds. We have to go recreate new infrastructure in Michigan. And so scaling is much more challenging. It takes more capital, more time. But yeah, it's again, I just keep coming back to it. There's so many changes that are still coming.
Now, another part that a lot of people are not thinking about is that the private guys, it's illegal. So if you can operate and do what you're doing legally and make a business out of it and generate income and make a great living, like we've seen Bruce Linton made $1 billion in 5 years from Canopy growth, huge success story.
Yep.
And he's one guy, not everybody's like that, but
he ended up with $1 billion.
Well, he was worth $1 billion when Canopy was at a higher price. I don't know what he's worth now, but he's got to be worth at least a few $100 million at the very least, even right now, which is pretty amazing. How many private guys, other than El Chapo, can say that they made $100 million in the cannabis sector without even touching a plant. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, for all the private guys, and I talk to guys that are private and public. I talk to both here in Canada because there's many both. And I would say that the private market is still 85% of Canada. That's how big it is. So it's still a huge market.
Just to clarify, when you say private, because there's private companies that are still legal.
I mean the illegal market, the illicit market.
The illegal, the illicit market.
Is about 85%. I would say it's about 85% in Canada, but that number is going to continue to shrink because they're starting to open up stores everywhere that are all legal, and they're shutting down all the illegal stores.
It's all tax. California has the same problem. That's why the regulatory structure down there is so chaotic. 75% of sales in California are still in the illicit market.
And you know what the problem is, and this is the problem that I see, is that there's still so much money to be made privately. These guys don't feel any need to change. However, if guys start getting arrested, if things start to change and it becomes more and more and more difficult and we continue to eat up the market share, eventually, in my opinion, what's going to happen is these private guys are going to realize it's not worth it. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to take the risk anymore. I could make more money publicly, and the market share is shrinking. People are not walking into my house anymore because people are walking to the neighborhood corner store.
Take a couple things to do that, right? Number one is you have to have the right tax structure in the state. One of the things Oregon did really well was I think there's still a fair amount of diversion that comes out of Oregon. Companies producing or individuals producing cannabis and trying to ship it out of state. But there's almost zero purchasing in Oregon for consumption, like in-state consumption, that is not done at a legalized dispensary. Because the tax structure is wrong. And the problem in California, until they change the taxes, is because there's no regulation on the illicit operators, because there's no taxes, they can offer the same product for a discount, right? Because you walk into a shop and that same eighth you're going to buy is $50 in the shop. You can buy it from sometimes an unlicensed shop right next door that's selling it for $30.
Yep.
Same product, same everything. What are you going to go do? You're going to spend the $30. And so, there's been a lot of pushback in California recently from some of the big companies who've been laying off staff because the market's not maturing at the rate they thought it would be. And that's kind of the big piece, is the regulatory structure is limiting because of the tax and it's more expensive. And the other issue you have is a lot of these communities are not opting in. And that's the biggest problem, whether it's in-state, like you're going to have an illicit market if you have, City A is legal and you can buy it there, but 15 miles away, City B is not. You don't necessarily want to drive to City B.
Yep.
Same problem on a global scale is you're going to continue to have illicit product leaving these states until, like in Texas, it's not a high price commodity because it's illegal there, and so there's a risk with that. And until you have a fully deregulated marketplace, you're going to continue to have these challenges with illegal operators. I don't think prison or jail or any of that stuff is going to deter them. But I think there's bigger things that the authorities need to focus on. It's that we have to come to the 21st century, which is cannabis should be legal.
Totally.
Right? It's a responsible product. It's not what they built into the 30s as the reefer madness mentality. Like, it needs to be used responsibly. It should not be given to children. But as adults, we have the right to choose. And cannabis has been proven to not have any of the negativity or the effects that people have put it into that class 1 schedule. Like, it's time to make it legal nationwide. Really is.
And the other part about being legal, which I agree with you, is the fact that it's safer.
Yep.
So do you want to go to the illegal market and maybe get some bad product? Or do you want to get product from a dispensary, a legal licensed producer or MSO who has had product that's lab tested? And personally, I would rather get something from the public guys because I believe it's safer. I really do. And I don't want to put something in my body that's not safe. I don't want to buy something from the black market not knowing where it's coming from. So that's something that I think about. And if I have the choice, I'd rather pay $20 more to get the legal lab tested product than to get the illicit product, which when I ask, my buddy, hey, is this good product? He's going to be like, yeah, try it. So, that's kind of the way it is, right? So I think it is changing. And I think it's going to continue to.
Right, think about all the cartridge issues. Most of that was tied to illegal product where they were putting illegal additives or unapproved additives into it, which are causing all those health problems.
Correct.
You're 100% right. Like, you need, the beauty of legalization is it's transparent, it's regulated, and it's safe. And it's coming. I mean, it's just, again, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but the horse has left the barn. I mean, we're moving towards a full deregulation, in each of these markets. And, it's a matter of when, not if, which is exciting.
I think that another thing that I would like to see the sector do is I think every producer should have a low-cost product. I really think this would be smart. Here in Vancouver, every dispensary you go to, they've got a house product. It's really cheap. It's like $4 a gram.
Yep.
Those are the ones that sell out first, right? Then they've got the $6 a gram product, $8 a gram product, $10 a gram product, $20 a gram product, higher THC, blow your mind type product. I think every producer should do this. If they did this, they would wipe out the black market. Because if everybody had even if they just broke even on that product, they would gain so many customers that would buy the cheaper product, and then you would get the customers buying the higher end product. You got the higher end people that are going to want the higher end product for their friends, for their parties, and then you're going to get the younger people that just don't have as much money, and they're going to buy the cheaper product just because they want something to smoke. I think every MSO and every licensed producer should do this. I think you guys should do this. I've seen it happen in every dispensary across this country. You walk into a dispensary, you ask for their house product, they're always sold out.
You're talking about velocity.
Yes.
One of Grown Rogue's big separators is that, I laugh because you probably don't know that many growers. But if you ever talk to a grower, we all have the best product.
Of course.
The best weed, right? Whatever.
Yes.
It's like artistry.
Yep. And totally.
Rogue's really good because it is a product to us. We think we do a very good job, but we're not trying to be the best, right? Like, you look at the outliers on your bell curve, and most of the velocity is in that middle section. But a lot of people who have been in this industry who are now producing these products have a really hard time essentially admitting to the fact that their product is not the best in the shop. We want to set a higher price, and we're willing to go to kind of that lower price point. But one of the things we've done a really, really good job on is establishing high quality at great prices. Because for us, it's all about velocity. I mean, there's indoor people like in Oregon that'll sell pounds for $2,500, but they sell one a month or two a month, right? We produce hundreds of pounds a month in our indoor facility, thousands of pounds on our outdoor products. Like, we can't sell one-off in a dispensary to fix them. We need velocity and sale through. And that's what dispensaries want as well. They don't want a product stay on their shelf for 3 months. They want it to be at a price point that their consumer base is going to purchase. And so you're 100% spot on. And in more mature states, that's happening, right? Like, you go into dispensaries in Oregon, you get quite a bit of variety in terms of pricing. You've got your $4 grams, you got your $8 grams, your $10 grams, your 12. And you're right, those lower ones, they move at a much faster rate.
They do. And one of the great examples of that here in Canada is CANNABIS has a product called Roll-Up, Re-Up. And it's a low-cost product. So they've got like a higher THC product, which is 28% THC. And that quarter costs like $70. And they've got a Re-Up product, which is 16% THC. It's Death Bubba. It's actually really good. And that product only costs $40 for a quarter. So the $30 difference. They got the highest and most THC potent product for $70 and a 16% THC product for $40. So now they got the cheapest product at the Spirit Leaf store and they got the most expensive product at the Spirit Leaf store. It's the same company. They just got two different strains. One strain for $40 a quarter, another one for $70 a quarter. $40 a quarter adds up to $160 an ounce. It's very comparable to the black market here in Canada. And $70 a quarter is $280 an ounce, which is really on the high end. You don't see pretty much anybody selling product at that price. But because they have so much THC in it, they're able to sell it, and it's a really big seller. So this is what I think we're going to see more of. I think it's very smart that companies are going in that direction. Another company is Hexo. Hexo has a product which I really like. It's a $140 ounce. And they literally have come out and said that this product is a black market killer. They came up with this product to go after the black market.
Interesting.
So this is what I think we're going to see more of, because in order for the public sector to compete with the black market, really, to me, yeah, quality is very vital, but pricing is actually just as important, if not more important, than quality.
You're 100% right. I mean, that's exactly what we've seen. That's why Oregon's done such a good job, and why we don't have an in-state like consumption that is in the illegal market, because you can walk into a dispensary, safe, transparent, tested, and priced at reasonable prices. Right? It makes sense. The biggest thing we're seeing, and it sounds like, listen, you talked a little bit there, and hopefully there's getting better separation in Canada, is, potency is not the best way to delineate pricing of the product. It really isn't. I mean, it's each market goes through its own kind of progression. But early in Oregon, it was all about, and it kind of still is, unfortunately, it's all about the higher testing gets higher price. It doesn't necessarily mean the effect's better, right? It's literally like we look at it, the potency is your gas pedal, right? Your terpenes, your entourage effect, the other components that are inside of the product are the steering wheel. That's why in like the competitions we enter, we're always super proud of when we win like terpene awards for the highest terpenes. That's really what creates the unique effects across the cannabis products. I mean, the best analogy is, right, if you go out to a bar, you don't walk in and say, I'll have the Everclear, please, because it's the highest, alcohol content. Like, you want to get something that tastes good, that you enjoy, consuming. But again, going back to the consumer's not educated. There's a few like really kind of like, you call them the headies or whatnot that understand the market or the products and understand the nuances, like a really fine, like, connoisseur of wine. But the mass market really doesn't know the difference between, a $4 gram and a $10 gram in terms of impact or effect. And so it's just, the whole industry across all these different pieces is still learning, maturing, getting more educated. It took a long time for people to get acclimated to the different qualities of wine, micro brews versus kind of, domestics. But, sketch coming.
And there's still a stigma associated to it. Like, for example, they're opening up stores all over Vancouver, and you can see when people walk in the stores, they look around, see if anybody's watching them go in. There's still a stigma, right? Because they're opening them up beside grocery stores, so their neighbors their school teachers are gonna be walking by and be like, "Rich, you're walking in there, right?"
I have friends that they're like in the community and they won't go into a store.
Yeah,
they'll go into a store out of the area because they're afraid of whether they're a teacher or like they're in a soccer club or whatever it is. And it's funny, my wife was started going rogue with us and was been very critical into how we're perceived in the community and how we interrelate with we've got 3 kids, how does that impact what are people going to think? And we've become a trusted resource for people.
Wow.
It's been so empowering. Like people are like her workout classes, and like moms at the school will come to her and say, hey, I can trust you, and my brother-in-law has this ailment, what do you recommend? Or I'm having trouble sleeping, you go to a dispensary with me. Because a lot of people are still uncomfortable with it.
Of course.
One, the stigma is they don't want people to see them, but there's also the fear of being, like you walk into a dispensary and it's not inviting. They feel uneducated, they're made to feel like, not stupid is the wrong word, but kind of like it's an uncomfortable environment. And, I predict, I've said this, I've got 3 kids, 13, 10, and 6. My 13-year-old still has some of the stigmas, right? She's still worried about what her friends think, her friends' parents.
Yeah.
But she grew up in this, cannabis is bad.
Yeah.
My middle is kind of like, whatever. She doesn't really think about it. My 6-year-old's like, Dad, it's just plants.
Perfect.
You know what I mean? Like she's going to grow up in an environment where cannabis has no stigmas.
Totally. I agree with that.
A generation. She's 6. So when she's 16 and 26, it's 10, 20 years before that subset of our world is that age.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. My daughter hates it. She's like, Dad, get out of cannabis. She's so terrified about the fact that I talk about cannabis because I have a CBD business, and she's just like, no, Dad, don't do it. You know? And then there's my son. He wears my hats. He comes up to me. I got this at the cannabis conference, Top Leaf. He goes, I like that. Can I wear that? I'm like, no, it's got a marijuana plant on it. You can't wear that at school. He wants to wear this to school. His friends come up to him and say, hey, Dad, my friends think you're a drug dealer. And I'm like, I'm not a drug dealer. I talk about cannabis. I don't sell it. And I go, even if I did, it's legal. So there's nothing wrong with it. But he's like, it's all, like, he's kind of says it tongue in cheek, kind of. Like, he goes, but it's true. Everyone thinks you're a drug dealer. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So yeah, there is a stigma still. And I'm sure that his friends' parents probably think I'm a drug dealer too. Or they probably talk about it like I'm a drug dealer too. But the thing is, I sit there and I talk to my kids. I'm like, well, it's legal now. So you can legally be a drug dealer and it's okay. There's nothing illegal about it. So even if I was, it's totally legal. So it's as if I was working at a liquor store. And, you know, I tell everybody this. I don't like alcohol.
Yep.
To me, the effects of alcohol are a million times worse in every single way than cannabis. Nothing good comes out of alcohol. Nothing. It doesn't take away your pain. Doesn't make you go to sleep. It doesn't make you feel good. It doesn't make you forget about your problems. If anything, it makes you sick. It makes you throw up. It gives you hangovers. You can't drive. You see double. There's nothing good that comes out of alcohol. It's bad for your liver. I know people that have it's killed them. It's destroyed their lives. But yet, that's legal. And nobody even worries about the stigma associated to alcohol.
It's taken time to get there.
It did.
Prohibition ended in the 30s, right?
Correct.
Definitely taken time for that to occur, and cannabis is going to be the same. That's why it's, again, I think it's 20 years before it's socially acceptable.
Totally.
I mean, a similar analogy, right? Like you can go to a gathering, and someone that doesn't drink is not going to be offended if you're having a beer.
Exactly. Exactly.
But if you pulled out a joint and started smoking it, you get a lot of stares. Probably even people that would consume are just like, hey, this is a little inappropriate. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, maybe not here in Vancouver, because here everybody smokes, so you could go and light up anywhere here. Like, Vancouver is a very interesting place. Like, you can literally light up anywhere in Vancouver, like on the streets, anywhere. But if you go to Alberta, you're not allowed to do that. So it's funny, state to state and province to province, it's different in Canada and the United States. But here in Canada, Vancouver is very normal for someone to just pull up on the street and light up. But in Alberta, you still can't do that. So, and it's going to change. There's going to become, like, we don't have, like, a Planet 13 here yet.
Yep.
We need that. This is what Canada needs, is places where people that want to partake in cannabis-related events and activities can just walk into, a nice place like a Planet 13 and have an experience where you're hanging out with other people that are just there for cannabis. When you walk in there, you're not going to have to feel bad about offending anybody because everybody's lighting up. This is what is still missing. We have a lot of little shops here in Vancouver where you can do that. Places like Amsterdam Cafe, they sell food, they sell drinks, they sell cannabis, they sell pipes, they sell CBDs, they sell papers, and everybody that's in there knows that there's going to be a lot of smoking going on, and everybody's cool with that. But we don't have those Planet 13 big facilities yet.
I don't know if we'll get a Planet 13 anywhere other than Vegas.
I want one.
That fits.
It does. It does. But it would be amazing for us to have those types of facilities here in Canada because we're fully legal. So why not? I implore Planet 13 to come here and open up one in Vancouver.
It'd be awesome. We should ask them. I mean, they got a pretty good model going down there in Vegas.
Totally.
I mean, Canada did a great job of pushing legalization and acceptance. I think they've done a poor job of rolling out consumer and distribution, right? Like there are limitations on branding, and they've done a lot of things really well, but I think they've missed the mark on some of them. Well, mostly coming to how do you get a lot of uptake in the market?
I agree.
Having a brand, how do you differentiate? Right, well, this is not a pill, right? I think Canada really went toward a medical approach, which is like when you take aspirin. Tylenol, it doesn't really matter whether it's this brand or not, it's a consistent product. Cannabis is not like that. And branding becomes really important, much more to like alcohol or things like that, or like consumer packaged goods. And so it's going to be harder to get the kind of uptake in Canada until they loosen some of the branding components that these companies in the U.S. are really building their future.
I think Canada is really focused on doing it the right way. I don't think they care about the results. I don't think they care about the revenues. I don't think they care about the public companies at all. They're not allowing them to advertise. They've really made it difficult. Like, their hands are tied, right? But what they are focused on is saying, listen, we're going to be the first. We're going to figure it out. And there's going to be ups and downs. But we want to make sure people aren't dying. So realistically, I have not heard of one person in Canada that's died because of cannabis.
Oh, that happens.
That's huge. So I think Health Canada, that's their focus right now, is let's make sure we have a rollout that's healthy, where people can feel confident that they can walk into these licensed producers and they can get a product that's not going to harm them.
100%.
I think that's been the biggest focus. And we're very conservative here in Canada. I'm shocked that we're legal. I never thought it would happen. So because we're such a conservative country, I'm really, really shocked that we are here ahead of America and ahead of a lot of countries. But I'm not shocked that they've had it be a slow rollout, because we're still a very conservative country. And Canada never wants to be that country where 10 people bought cannabis and died. I know that's what they don't want. More than anything else, that is their focus. That is their mandate, is healthy products, healthy medicine. And I think they've done a good job of that. We're not having these huge vape scares here that we've had in the US. So where people have literally died. You just don't hear it in Canada. So for whatever reason, they've done a pretty good job in that way, even though they made it really difficult for all of these companies to make money, to grow, and to really expand their operations, and specifically profit in Canada, because like with the edibles, 10 milligrams. Packaging. That's ridiculous. I know in California, you guys have 1,000 milligram packages.
I don't know what in Oregon, the limit's 50. I don't know, 1,000 seems high.
I've heard there's like 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams. I've never seen them personally. I think that's crazy. Like, I think you could die taking that much, right? Like, it seems like you could knock out a bull with that much. But I've heard stories of people saying, 500 milligram gummies, 1,000 milligrams. I'm like, that is nuts.
That's crazy. That's a lot. I think the biggest I've seen in the recreational markets is 100 in one package. Just because they're concerned about, not overdose, but you take too much, it's just challenging.
Totally.
When you get to, ensuring that new consumers don't end up over consuming and having a bad experience. Because that's really, with a new consumer, dosage is so critical.
Totally.
Right? Making sure that, if you try a new product, that you don't end up having an experience, because you hear the stories, especially with edibles, where people consume too much.
Yes, and they become a vegetable.
Hospital, or, anxiety issues. And so you really, controlling education just becomes really, really important.
Obi, we've been live for over an hour. If there's anything that you want people to know before we leave and we say goodbye about Grown Rogue, what would it be?
Just patience, right? This sector it's a long trajectory towards where we're going. Really be looking at companies that are doing the right thing the right way with the right leadership team. And then I think what I'd really like to tell the people that are on today is, I'm really excited in the next couple of weeks to talk about one of the exciting expansion things that we've been working on, and we hope to have completed. So looking forward to connecting back up with you, Rich, sometime in maybe early middle of February to talk about kind of the next growth of Grown Rogue and kind of our 2020 focus towards our expansion strategy. Well,
thank you so much for your time today, Obi. Keep up the great work, and we'll be watching you and following your story very closely.
All right. Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for being here. And everybody, thank you for watching. Have yourselves a great day. This is Obi Strickler, the CEO of Grown Rogue.